Okay. So I didn't plan any notes or anything for this live stream. I just was going to kind of share about this because I feel like it's just helpful to hear and honestly probably helpful for me to share and tell you all about and process. And yeah, just I think like helpful to remember that like what we see online versus like what someone is dealing with, managing, whatever you want to say, what they're living is so different ultimately. But I also think sometimes it's really good to hear that because then it doesn't feel like things have to be perfect for you to also like show up or get results or those kind of things too. So I want to talk about all that. Hey Michelle, happy Monday. I feel like I've alluded to this a lot. Like I've definitely said like, oh, sleep has been really challenging for us and different versions of that. But I kind of just want to like give a breakdown of like what's been going on for me, what that's looked like, how it's impacted the business, how we're dealing with things now, etc. Hi Nana, thank you guys for being here. Oh, and reminder, any comment, you're entered to win any one of our products. It's just like a thank you for listening and for being here and for talking to me today. So I had Bennett, my son, in April of 2021. So he's 27 months now, like 3 months past 2. Hey Lisa, good to see you. And the first like 3 months of his life, he was like A+ sleeper. Hey Emma. Like obviously there were things that are hard about being a newborn parent, and a lot was hard for me then in the sense that my dad was sick at the time. He had brain cancer and he passed away when Bennett was 3 months old. So there was a lot of hard then, but one thing that was not hard with Bennett when he was young was sleep. And so I say that just to kind of set the stage that around 3 to 4 months, things really changed. And basically, mine was 13. That's an interesting experience. Yeah. So basically hi Morgana, hey Emma, for the last 2 years, literally, I mean, like like I said, he's 2 years and 3 months, so 2 years, we have not been getting very much sleep. Like I have gotten very little sleep, I would say, for the last 2 years. And I just want to share like a few different things about that. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I feel like we all go through difficult seasons or have difficult things happen. And I think that sometimes it's helpful to see like other people going through that, and also to remember that like that wasn't something I was regularly talking about for a lot of reasons. I mean, I would say that sleep was challenging, and obviously in like my close circles, I would certainly be open to it, but I didn't talk about it a ton outside of that. I think in largest part because I never wanted my clients to feel like that was something they should be taking into consideration. Not that my clients can't like care about me or be considerate of me, but like ultimately at the end of the day, like them feeling like, oh, I shouldn't reach out to Lacey because she's like not getting enough sleep or something is helpful to no one. And so basically, I mean, I would say he's probably was up 6 times a night. From like 3 months to recently. And that is intense. It was such an intense experience. Like I kept saying to everyone around me, like, I know there's something in this for me. There has to be. Like this is so big and feels like so insurmountable. And it was so interesting because you guys know my edge is always control. And so my inclination is always like, what can I do? What can I fix? And so there was like a very long period of time where I was like just so deep in like, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to fix this? Right. Then a lot of that wasn't working. And then there was a period of time where I was like, okay, I just have to get really, really deep in surrender. How can I just keep surrendering this, keep surrendering this, keep surrendering this? And I would vacillate a lot between feeling like, nope, show up, figure it out, find a solution, fix this, and your lesson here is to let go and to surrender. Yeah, 6 times. And it also is like really impactful in other ways because like, for example, like when we would put him to bed, it's not like he would get up like, an hour or 2 later usually. And so like we didn't really have our evenings, or like it's not like I could have gotten up earlier in the morning because that he usually needs a lot of help in the morning. So it was like this really intense thing too, where it was like, I never could be like, oh, I have child free time here. It was like, never. But I think like the vast solution is interesting to say, because I think a lot of us go through that with really big challenges of like trying to go, okay, that it's my role to like show up and fix it, or it's my role to let it go, surrender it, you know. And I really would go back and forth quite a bit. We tried almost everything you could think of apart from sleep training. And I know that like it might be really obvious to be like, well, if he's not sleeping, just sleep train him. But the thing is like, and I would have said like 100% before I had him, like, oh, I'll like absolutely sleep train my child. But something in me always felt so off about that. Like my gut just kept telling me not to do it, not to do it, not to do it. And that was also really difficult for me, because it wasn't just impacting me, it was also impacting like my husband, right? And he never pushed me to sleep train, but I mean, I certainly felt the responsibility of being the one that was like, we're not doing that. So it was this like interesting juxtaposition to be the one being like, we're not doing that, but I don't know what we're doing, or like, we're not doing that, but I don't know how to make it better. I like to fix things. I like to problem solve. So to be the one being like, I'm gonna like in some ways create part of this problem and also not present like a solution at all to it was like very hard for me to have to like sit in and hold. And I think like that so parallels just so much in business. It's like sometimes our gut is telling us something and we know it's right, but we don't know what that looks like, or we don't know the solution, or we don't know how that's going to come to fruition, but we still have to listen. Yeah, Angie said, I concur. I really thought I would, and then I couldn't. Same, like exactly the same. I mean, if you would have asked me like up to the day I gave birth, I'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, right? And then like right after, I'm like, oh, something is telling me this is a no. So all that to say, Emma says, right there with you. My kids are 2 and 4 and did do sleep training and constantly fought the back and forth between, is this what I want? Is it not what I want? Yeah, like it's so hard to be in that like push-pull, right? But something kept telling me something else is going on here, something else is wrong. And again, that's why I tried to like, you know, think of all these other solutions and do all these other things. And I really would get in the what's the word? Shiny object syndrome like mindset, where I would think like, this is just an example, but it's like when we took away his passy, I was like, okay, this will be it. This will be our shiny object. Like we're just going to take away his passy, and then all of a sudden he's going to sleep through the night, and that will be the magic fix kind of thing. Like I just really was like, oh, this next thing will change it like that. And then I kept getting disappointed like over and over. I know, but not a parent, but here for this wisdom. Thank you. Promise there will be wisdom aside from sleep training. I have other points. Thank you for being here. Annetta said we tried sleep training for 2 evenings for some time and it was awful. It's so hard. Angie said I had us scheduled to the max and then I gave birth and holy F did the old me disappear. I mean, for real. For real. It's wild how that happens, right? It's like everything you're like, I will do this or I won't do this. The universe is like, you're cute, stop. Crystal said tried it and couldn't handle the pain of letting them cry what seemed like forever. I think that's what's so interesting too, right? Like in some ways it does go against like our natural instinct a bit, right? You get the baby you need apparently. I know, Angie, that is like fully the lesson I am in. I'm sure we'll be in for the next, you know, I was going to say 18 years, but fuck, it's longer than that, you know? Kate said, this is me, but with getting our rescue dog to be comfortable with my husband, and settled in the household. Kate, Sarah is in that too. So they rescued a dog and she only likes Sarah and not Ben. And it's like such a thing. So just like seeing you in that, because I really, through watching her experience, get how intense that is. Yeah. Crystal said the good thing is this phase passes. Yeah. So like, it's been so hard. Like, waking up 6+ times a night for 2 years is like, honestly, like one of the, I was going to say one of, I take it back. It is by far the most mentally challenging thing I have ever faced in my entire life. And I know that that sounds so dramatic. But it is like not only the like physical exhaustion of that, right? Like sleep deprivation is like literal torture. But the vacillating between how to fix it, the feeling like there's this magic bullet that if I could just figure out, right? And I would talk myself off from that because like I see that in business all the time of like, probably no one thing is a magic bullet. We're probably going to make some changes over time and, you know, X thing will get better or whatever. But yeah, 100% parenting has been the hardest thing mentally I've ever experienced, right? So I kept feeling like something else is going on, something else is going on. But then I would also like gaslight myself a little bit and be like, maybe you just want something else to be wrong. And so I mentioned a few things to our pediatrician. And she was kind of like, nothing's wrong. And I almost felt like a little bit ashamed then because I was like, oh my God, I like want something to be wrong with my kids so I can sleep. Like that's so fucked up, right? Oh, thank you, Shannon. It does not sound dramatic. It sounds horrible. Yeah, Kate said, in trying to manage everyone's emotions in the process. Yes, exactly that. Oh, the magic bullet mindset. Definitely very familiar with this one, right? Yes. So I felt kind of bad after like that thing with our pediatrician. And just, yeah, like, I was like, ooh, I really need to like fix something in me. And so many of my lessons in life, from childhood to my previous marriage on, are that I tried to fix me instead of always fixing my circumstances. And I think there's like a huge thing to be said for fixing yourself, watching your thoughts. I'm like such an advocate of that. But I tend to lean too far in that direction sometimes. And so I did that in this case a bit. Like I really leaned a little too hard into like, oh my God, she's right. It must be me. I must need to get more comfortable with this. Like I pretty much have two choices. I can either like sleep train him or not. And if I'm not, I just have to like deal with the consequences and whatever. But my gut just kept telling me that was not it. And we tried so many different like sleep configurations. And so we moved him to like one of those, I think they call them Montessori beds. So it's like not a crib. It's like a bigger bed and it's on the floor, but it has like rails around it. So we moved him to that. And then I was ending up sleeping in there with him a decent amount so that it was just easier when he would get up. I could get him all that. And I just kept noticing a lot of the stuff I had told the pediatrician, like about how I felt like he was breathing at night and all of this stuff. And like, you know, we went back and I like kind of talked to her about it again. And she was kind of like, yeah, it's fine. So now I'm on like maybe the second or third time I've talked to her. We're a year and a half in at this point. I'm losing my fucking mind. I feel bad for my son because I'm like, if I'm losing my mind, I'm sure he is too. It's not like he's like doing it to me on purpose. It's like, he can't be happy with this either, right? Mm-hmm. Rebecca says I do that too. It must be me. That is totally, yeah, that's always my pattern. Working on it. So I really got to a point where I was like, okay, I just have to surrender this. So I had the, I can't even figure out how to wrap all of this together because this next part's kind of like convoluted in terms of like a lot of things happened at once. But basically I had this epiphany of like, oh, I think like part of me is like creating this because obviously aren't we always, or like, I think this is a lesson in it for me. I don't feel like totally ready to fully share that yet because I'm still kind of in the process of all of that. But I kind of had this epiphany around what was like benefiting me in this. It definitely had to do with, like some of the stuff I was processing after my dad died, things like that. So anyway, I had this big epiphany. I was out of town when I had this actually. And I was on a retreat and it had nothing to do with the retreat actually, which is like ironic. I was just like separately, I think, cause I had like downtime and cause I got a full night of sleep probably. And my husband that night was like, the craziest fucking thing ever just happened. Like we have like rocked this child to sleep forever. He has such a hard time falling asleep on his own. My husband was like, hey, the craziest shit ever just happened. He asked me to leave his room and he put himself to sleep. And I was like, I don't even believe you. Like that feels like a lie. I can't even fathom or picture that. But he did. And it was like, literally, like I had that realization of like, this is what I'm holding on to and why I have to change something. And then like, it's truly the very next night, Kenny was like, I don't know what happened, but here's this. And so it actually did start to get a bit better, but I was still noticing. So he wasn't putting himself to sleep like that every night, just so we're clear, but like it seemed like he was more comfortable in his own bed. So like it did start to get a little bit better and a little bit more manageable. We were getting less than 6 wake-ups. Like it felt like, okay, we're getting there. Like I feel more rested. I remember saying to like a few people like, oh my God, like I didn't realize how tired I was, and it feels like it's getting better. Yeah, connection between parents and kids, the energy connection is so wild. So then, like, okay, it's getting better. And then the realization I had, I was like really like working on, like, okay, I need to look at this. I need to work on this. Like, this is some of my stuff. And then I was in there with him, right? Like sleeping, but we were getting a bit more sleep. And I just kept feeling like something else is wrong. And it just was like grating at me. And I was like, oh, but it's getting better. Like, why do I keep having this feeling? So we go back to the doctor again. And I'm like, listen, you are giving us a referral to an ENT. I don't care if you don't think anything's wrong. I was very aggressive. And just was like, I'm done with this shit. Like, I'm going to listen to myself. And I think I was, again, like getting a little bit more sleep, so I had better perspective and honestly just even more bandwidth and emotional energy to like go in there and be like, here's what you're gonna do. So to make a long story short, we go to the CNT. We walk in. Brace yourself. Bennett is in there for all of 1 minute. And he goes, oh, wow, he's really having some breathing stuff, huh? And I'm like, excuse? And he's like, yeah, I can tell he's not breathing through his nose at all. Like, he really has some breathing stuff going on. What? 1 minute we were fucking in there. It was so wild. So I was like, what? I know. So we go through this whole appointment, and he's like, oh my God, you must not be sleeping at all. And I'm like, no. He could not have been more validating. Like, I literally am so proud of myself that I held it. I mean, not that it mattered. I just didn't want to scare him, but I like held it together in his office. I was like, do not cry right now. You want to listen to what he has to say. So anyway, so validating. Then he goes, wait, Kate said I slept horribly for 2 to 3 years because of personal stuff and the way it completely affects my ability to process or make decisions and manage emotions. Right. Like, you just literally cannot think straight sometimes. Like, it's wild. So anyway, then he goes to me, hey, did you have trouble breastfeeding? And I was like, yeah. Like, we had a really hard time breastfeeding. I ended up pumping for most of a year. We had like a really, really hard time. Breastfeeding. Was like, oh, I bet, because he can't breathe through his nose, and also he has a tongue tie, which we had checked out by our pediatrician. And he was like, this, yeah, like, of course it's hard for him to eat. Of course this has been going on. Like, of course you're not getting sleep, all of this stuff. So he's like, listen, we have to do an x-ray. Like, I want to make sure, like, my assumptions are right here, but I'm almost positive. Like, he needs to get his adenoids out. Okay, great. So we go get the x-ray literally that day. I was like in make it happen mode. It's like, it's happening today. So we go get it. He calls us. He's like, he absolutely looks like he needs surgery. Let's get it scheduled. So we get it scheduled. Go to surgery. Jess at Remodel Blood just went through something similar. Huge breakthrough to learn from specialists about breathing issues in children. Yeah, I had no idea. Like, I sensed something but had no idea, right? Yeah, poor kid, exactly. I mean, obviously poor me, because holy fuck, 2 years of not sleeping, but like, poor him, right? Kate said it's amazing how much having an answer relieves you, even though it's the beginning and not the end. Oh my God, I was like first of all, I was fucking livid, but otherwise I was so relieved. And so get the x-ray, he gets it, we're gonna get the surgery, we get the surgery, and the doctor comes in, you know, after they like do the surgery, and he's like, okay, so listen, I've seen bigger adenoids, but for his face shape and size, I haven't. He was like, his airway was 80% blocked. I mean, can you even? I cannot. Yeah, my gut knew all along, right? But I did not. Here are the lessons, right? My gut knew, but I did not have the like resources in my brain from the lack of sleep, I think. Well, I know, right? To be able to like push that forward. And like part of me like wants to blame myself and be like, oh, I should have pushed harder, but then like the other side of me is like, I did that for like a minute, and I was like, that's bullshit. I showed up, I did what I could with the resources I have. But I feel like we so often miss that. We're like in business, we're being so hard on ourselves for something, and what we really have to look at is like, how resourced are you right now? How resourced are you with what you have to go do the hard things that are required, to go think about this from like a really high level perspective, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's what I was missing, right? Plus I was like so in my like emotional grief from losing my dad, becoming a mom, like all of these things. Like I just was not resourced enough to like push this forward in the way that I like could have if it was like a different situation, right? Yeah, so glad we found out. Crazy. Yeah, and it's like so wild to be like, I knew. But like Rebecca said, it's so hard when it's like an authority figure too. I think that's so important to talk about here too, is like power dynamics and that, right? And like, right, this is what Kate's saying too, is this is how systemic injustice also affects people too, right? And like, I mean, we could go so deep on that. Like, I am like a well-resourced white woman with insurance, and I still just like could not get someone to listen to me. It's crazy. Like imagine what other people are dealing with and how this goes on and on and on and on. I mean, it's absolutely unfathomable to think about. And so I really just feel like that is such a parallel to business, and I just want to like talk about this all the time is this idea of like sometimes you can know something and you can still not be in a brain space to move on it or to action it. And I feel like so often in business that is what we do not take into account, is like, how resourced are you to be able to deal with the things you have to deal with to do all this, right? How much sleep are you getting? How are your needs being met? Like, how are you caring for yourself? I think like something that I'm like proud of in the business is that, I mean, obviously I launched Dateable, which like that was wild, but I feel like that did help me in grief, right? But like I didn't do shit new at A Lit Up Life for 2 years. Like I'm gonna run the first masterclass I've done in like 3 years or something in the fall, in September. Like I did not push myself to do things that I did not have the resources for, thank goodness. But I feel like so often in business, that's exactly what we're doing. We're acting like the new mom should be like scaling like crazy, or like the person going through a really, really, really difficult time should have the resources to show up and do all of the difficult things that business requires. And this situation just showed me so much how that is just not true. That is not real. That is not what most of us are working with, right? Like what most of us are working with is the resources we have at any given moment. And if they're low, we have to acknowledge that, and we have to take that into account. Like I feel like our industry just does not do that regularly. Like we do not go, oh yeah, well of course. Like I think all the time about how I built my business before I had kids. Like of course that was different. Of course that was easier. It doesn't like negate what I did and that it's amazing. It just was objectively different and objectively easier. It just was. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. I know. You know, it's funny. I feel like the business actually, I feel like, helped me keep going. Like I feel like if I was going to a job I hated on top of all of that, I thought about that so often, I think I would have just fallen apart. like, because I got to go to like a job that I liked and that fulfills me a lot and that does a lot for me, I actually think it was like resourcing me. Thank God. But I mean, truly, if I was in that and then I was like also going to a job that I hated, doing work I hated, especially as someone like a generator who thrives on doing like work she loves, I really think I would have had a mental breakdown. Like, and that's like a case for why it's so important to have the shit that we love too. It's because it makes it feel like it gives back to us and like we want to show up for it. I feel like that was such an important lesson for me in this season too, is that like, I'm not saying I felt 10 out of 10 in the business all the time or that there weren't hard days. 1000% there were. But I know for sure, that's what made it easier for me. Nova said, just yesterday I did some majorly hard relational stuff that I didn't feel capable of until I fully landed in my solo vacation. So vital. Oh, I love that. I think that's so valuable. What you're saying though is like, you gave yourself the space and resources and like, you know, literal physical ability to do that. Where like at a different point, you might not have had that. And I think that, you know, again, that's like so true in business, is like, there are times where like space and resources are abundant, and that's usually when it's good to lean into the harder stuff, and there are some times where they're smaller, and that's when we have to recognize like the harder stuff probably isn't like the best thing to lean into at that time. So yeah, we're like kind of coming out of it now. I mean, I think like it's a little hard to say because he had 2 weeks of recovery from surgery, and when they recover from the adenoid thing, they're like actually extra stuffy, and it's extra hard to breathe and stuff because they're so full, and then they like, it's gross, it's not worth saying, but like their scabs fall, it's like a whole thing. So that was kind of hard, and then he immediately got sick right after that. So that was hard. So I feel like we're just like coming out on the other end. Like, it's not like wrapped up in a bow, but like at least the intensity I was feeling around it, where I was like, something is wrong, is gone. Like that feels like, I can breathe, which like, that's enough for me right now. Like that's really like what I needed, I think, more than anything, is to be able to be like, okay, this feeling is real. I can trust myself, and now I can put it down because he's okay. But yeah, like we're still coming out of that. I imagine it will take months for me to feel, I don't know, not sleep deprived is probably one of those things, but even like for me to feel like, yeah, like out of that. But there's like light at the end of that tunnel, and I think that's all that matters. Christina said, for me, there's such a tension between this, doing what you can with the resources you have, and personal responsibility. It's challenging, but I appreciate this perspective. Oh my God, 100%. Like, I think that there is such a gray area on this, right? Like, there's also the other side of it where like any emotion you have, you feel like stops you from doing a thing. Which like isn't at all what I experienced. I had plenty of emotions that said to me like, just stop what you're doing, sleep all day, and like never get out of bed kind of thing, right? And obviously I chose the opposite. I chose to keep showing up in my business. I chose to keep things moving forward. I chose to own that ultimately at the end of this, however it ends up, like I want this business still, and so I'm gonna show up for that, you know? So I totally agree with you, Christina. I think my personal experience is like always pushing so hard and having to kind of like regulate on the other side of that. So like I think that was my lesson here, but I think there's certainly a lesson on the other side, which is like, you can do really hard things. Like if you would have asked me before I had a kid, like if you're not sleeping well for 2 years, could you still run your business? I would have said no. Turns out the answer is yes. Turns out you can still run your business, make lots of money, have good experiences, have happy clients, like all of that kind of stuff. You can still do all that, right? It's just, there are trade-offs, you know? And I think there's also like where it gets easier is when you're acknowledging that. Like when I was able to say to myself, like, hey, I probably can't do these 4 things because I don't have the capacity for that right now. In my opinion, that actually made my business better because I didn't try to like half-ass do a bunch of things that I actually didn't have the bandwidth or energy for. My business got better because I full out did what I could with what I had. Intuition doesn't leave you alone until whatever it is resolving. That's the truth. Lucy, hi. Jess says, I deeply relate. I had an undiagnosed sleep disorder for a few years. My doctor gaslit me and said I was imagining things. Luckily figured out what it is and getting treated, but chronic sleep deprivation is no joke. Damn, I'm so sorry. Isn't that wild? Like, I feel like that is such a thing. I've had my own kind of medical experiences recently, and I feel like that is so, like, a story that I hear so often of personally experienced of just like being so unheard and unlistened to. It's just so wild. Parallel to the coaching industry about coaches making us feel unheard and unlistened to. Yeah, and gaslit. Our medical system is so messed up fully. So yeah, that is where I'm at. Like, I think, you know, I feel like I want there to be almost like two lessons in this. One is like, hey, remember that like what you see online isn't always what's happening. But also like, remember that you can show up through really, really hard things if you have your business set up in a way that supports that. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I showed up and did this stuff, but I also feel like I had systems and support and things in place that made that possible, that made it possible for me to like be so sleep deprived and like still run the business and still do a good job. But I also do wish I would have like pushed harder and listened to my intuition sooner. But, you know, and again, I also give myself grace for the fact that like I don't think I was capable of that at the time. So I feel like this is like one of those like a very nuanced conversations, but I just want to share it because I have been in it. And I mean, realistically still am to a certain extent. I think I still probably have more to process here and more to like see what is in it for me as we kind of come out on the other side of that. And I'm excited to see, you know, what's the word? Like turns back on for me almost. Like, do I feel more creative? Do I feel, I don't know, like more connected, all of those things that I think like lack of sleep dulls in you. So I'm like excited to see where that goes for me too. But yeah, it has been like a very interesting and wild ride. And like we all go through really tough shit while running the businesses. And I think, you know, the biggest reminder for me is the acknowledgement of that is key. It doesn't mean it lets you off the hook. It doesn't mean you don't still have to do what you got to do, right? Like having that, it doesn't mean I was like let off the hook from still having to like show up, be a business owner and all of those things, right? But acknowledging it, noting it, making it matter as part of like the holistic experience of what I'm dealing with is so, so important. Like we cannot separate the human from the business owner. And I feel like in our space, when we act like business exists in its own compartment outside of anything else that we're dealing with, we're just doing such a disservice to ourselves as humans. Hey, Emily, thank you. Doing such a disservice to ourselves as humans. Like, truly, your business exists because you exist. Your business exists because you are the number one asset in your business. And so figuring out how to use that asset appropriately, spend the energy that asset has wisely is everything. It really is. Like, I'm so grateful that I locked in, so to speak, and let myself do that because I feel like I like used the asset I had in the best way that I could. And I think I'll probably have a lot more to use in the future if I so choose. But how I used it then was the best I could have done at the time. And I think we have to make that okay and enough sometimes. I think we're so used to comparing like where we're at to where everyone else is at outside of what's actually happening in our life. What your live stream is experiencing performance issues. Oh, okay, great. Are you guys having trouble? Tell me. Yeah, just outside of that. So anyway, that is my takeaway. Life's for all of us at different points and in different times. And if we're always comparing ourselves, like if I was comparing myself to somebody that like was getting a full night's sleep every night, it would just not be the same, you know? Or if I was comparing myself to somebody that like had time to work in the evening after their kid went to bed or before they woke up, it just wouldn't be the same. Like that was not my reality at the time. And so it doesn't mean I still can't do amazing things. I mean, I think I have and I am, but it also means I have to like do it with grace and do it with recognition and do it with realizing that like it's a season. Like if I'm going to have this business for 20 years, am I going to give a shit about the 2 years where I didn't like whatever, insert thing, you know, triple my income or whatever? Of course fucking not. Who cares? Like really, right? But am I going to be really grateful that I wasn't an asshole to myself in that time and that I treated myself with grace and that, you know, I didn't fuck myself up in 100 other ways? Absolutely. So it does not mean you still can't get shit done. It does not still mean that you can't show up. It doesn't mean that you still can't be like a badass and get results and grow and all of those things. But if that comes at the expense of yourself, and if that comes only if you pretend that like life isn't lifing, then I think it's not worth it. That is my take. Everyone's circumstances are different. Yeah, 100%. Like it just is. And I feel like that's not a bad thing to say, you know? It doesn't mean that you can't, like you have to have a perfect set of circumstances to get what you want either. I don't think that's true at all. But there's just so much more gray to it than I feel like we typically acknowledge. And honestly, probably same for me. Like I'm sure there was more gray to it than I would have acknowledged before I, you know, went through the last 2 years. So we learn and we figure that out and we adjust as we go. So I hope that was helpful. I do not have, you know, again, like a perfect way to wrap this up, still in it a bit, but just wanted to share and be transparent and yeah, just say like we all have those times where we're fucking in it. That is what it is. So thank you guys for listening to me. This was like healing for me to be able to like share and say and own too. So grateful to you guys for being here and being part of this community. So appreciate you. I hope that you have a beautiful week and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye guys.